Transform your startup journey with the Energy Tech Nexus. Connect with fellow founders, access critical resources, and be part of a community shaping the future of energy and carbon tech. Your path to building a Thunder Lizard starts here. Learn more at energytechnexus.com.
Welcome back to the show. Today, I'm really excited to have Sean Kelly, who's the CEO of Amperon. Amperon provides AI-powered electricity forecasting and analytics solution for every electron on the grid. Welcome to the show, Sean.
Thanks so much for having me.
So excited to have you here. Maybe we could start off with, tell us a little bit about Amperon and what problem are you really solving for the energy transition?
Yeah, great question. The problem that we're solving is that what's coming down the pipe, the future forecasting is very difficult. If you look at our website back in July of 2018, there's a paper or a Medium article that my co-founder Abe Stanway wrote, and literally laying out why we thought Amperon was the company to start. And thankfully for us, we've had no pivots along the way because we knew EVs were coming. We did not know that we'd get the free tax credit and people would be very incentivized to do that. We knew PV was coming, probably didn't think that 20 gigs of utility scale solar in Texas would be on the grid at that point. We knew smart meters were continuing to come. They started back in around 2007-8 with the Obama stimulus. And so we knew we were getting better data. It's funny that us in energy call big data 1 meter or 1 meter read every 15 minutes, whereas the tech people that we have are like, what is our iPhone hearing from this conversation? 1 data point every 15 minutes? I don't think so. We just knew that it was going to get significantly harder. And so that's why we started with demand forecasting. And then we realized that the story now is not demand forecasting, it's net demand forecasting. So as we're sitting here in Houston, Texas, if it's a really windy day, prices are cheap. It really doesn't matter what the load is going to be. If there's 25 gigawatts of wind and another like 15, 18 gigs of solar, it just doesn't matter what the load is. So yeah, that's where we knew it was coming. We didn't also know that everyone's meter was going to change with COVID and everyone was going to start working from home. So our thesis couldn't have been more spot on. And there were things in there that were correct that we didn't even know would be that correct.
Yeah. So tell us about how, I guess, complicated this problem is. Are you going down to the generating asset level for, well, you said demand, so it's not supply necessarily.
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the generating asset level, yes. So we're doing independent solar, utility scale solar assets, as well as we'll be launching later this year, wind. And we also do on an ISO level, the wind and solar forecast, us versus ERCOT versus CAISO versus PJM. And so we are looking at it on an asset level, but then on the meter side, we'll look at it as the kind of all of the ISO. So we're in all 7 ISOs in the United States and both balancing markets, so Western imbalance as well as the Southeast, and 16 countries in Europe because a meter's a meter, a megawatt's a megawatt. It doesn't matter what language it's in. So we're doing all the way down. We've got roughly 10 million meters under management.
Yeah. So how does that work? It's not like public data, I take it.
Correct. It's not public data. We're going in and getting the data either through a SCADA read from our client, who they'll upload to us, or we'll get it from EDI data, which is old archaic data that utility companies get. I think it started in like the 60s or 70s, or we'll get it through the ISO directly. And so we'll go in and look on behalf and we'll be like, oh, Jason Energy, we'll go in and get a like load serving entity certificate and get the data that way. So there's a few different ways to get it, but at the end of the day, it's still really dirty and it's continuing to get better, but there's gaps in it. There's zeros in it. There's negative prints in it. And so a data cleaning becomes a lot of the story too, which is nice that on the engineering side, we're hiring from the Metas, Amazons, Google, Microsofts of the world because they know data.
Yeah. Interesting.
So who then is your primarily your client then?
Yeah, so we've done a good job of diversifying our client segments. And so we started off here in Texas with reps, retail energy providers. So for those of you who don't know, there's 14 states in the United States where you get to choose your own electricity. Texas is unique in that, as we know, if you don't choose one, your lights are off. There's no power. Whereas when I lived in New York, you could choose one, but you just automatically had Con Edison as a backstop. So that's where we started. The goal was to get meter data as quickly as possible, and dealing directly with the retailers is significantly faster than utilities.
Because they have to measure it anyway, so they want to bill.
They got exactly. That's exactly why they have to have it, because they got to know what you used, and now you have all these cool different plans. So I'm personally on Tesla's plan, and so it's great because my car just automatically, as long as it's plugged in, starts charging at 10 p.m. And so they need to know not to bill me for that. And so you've got to have these actual like intervals, and they've got to know to turn the car on at 10 o'clock. So that's where we started. Great place to start. It was definitely hard to watch like Winter Storm Uri and live through that, because that really hurt the retail industry. Yeah. Next after that is traders. That's my people. That's my background. That's what I did for 11 years. And so as we were talking about before we came on, that's when like having a D. Shaw as an investor is really helpful, just because it kind of gives you that street cred of, hey, this is a big, powerful fund is not only using, but investing in Amperon. And so traders came second. We went from there to public power. So munis and co-op, kind of the forgotten ones. There's 3,300 municipalities and cooperatives. I lump CCAs, community choice aggregators, primarily in California, into this. And so we've done a really good job of working with some of the aggregators. So like American Municipal Power has 134 munis under it. And so we're able to kind of go work that way. And then the next we went to is, getting back to your earlier question, is IPPs, so the independent power producers. This is anyone who produces power. So we lump batteries into here. Obviously, you've got wind, solar, but even natural gas. Anyone who needs to know kind of how best to dispatch their plant. So fifth, we went to C&I, so commercial and industrial clients. And so this is anyone who has some megawatts of load. And so we worked with someone very forward thinking. This is the space I'm really excited about as we start having regulations coming down of like scope 2 and things of that nature, which we've gotten rough guardrails around a 2028 timeframe. I think that people are going to really take off, because in the C&I space, it's like LNG. That's why everyone's in Houston for gas tech right now. You look at all these data centers. That falls into this. Data center is the hottest topic right now. And so just kind of continuing on that path. And then last and definitely not least, but utilities. And so utilities, we took a unique approach in that we knew that it was a slower moving process. And we also knew that if you're early stage, they should not trust a like year-old startup that has no track record. And when I first started pitching them, it raised $860,000, not over 30 million. And they should not, for critical infrastructure, trust an early stage startup. So we didn't actually go sell to utilities until after year 5, when we finally we had money, we had a proven track record. And then you get to go in and say, hey, this is an Amperon shaped peg, and there's the Amperon shaped hole, as opposed to kind of going in. And the innovation competitions are great and it works for some companies, but for us, we just realized that doing these kind of like long pilot cycle was going to be hard. But now utilities are kind of flying off the shelf. And also that's in part because we have Microsoft as a channel partner. They are going in and introducing us to utilities, and we're introducing them to utilities as well. And just it's a really strong partnership set up by our chief revenue officer, Alex Robart, who had been multiple years in like the executive team of both energy and sustainability at Microsoft.
So the what you're providing them is forecasting.
Yeah.
But I assume each of these constituents use that data in different ways. Especially the traders make money differently than the REPs. So how do you have to change the tools you give them, or are you giving them a fire hose of data? How does it work?
Yeah, definitely a variety of different ways. And you're very right, is that some traders are trying to make money where retailers are trying to mitigate risk, right? And so their job is not to make money on the trade. Their job is to basically say, okay, I got your home. And now I need to go lock in that price because I agreed to set price for you for 2 years. I need to go and hedge that. And obviously the electricity market is like the stock market. It moves around. You can't just say Apple stock is going to be worth the same forever. And so people ingest data definitely different ways. The short-term forecast runs 360 hours. And that's because that's how long the weather models run. And so the weather models, you've got the Euro or ECMWF, you've got the GFS, you've got those all, they're government models that continue to run like 4 times a day. The shorter term ones run every hour or every 3 hours. And so that's why our predictions go out that 360 hours. And then we have a longer term model that runs out 10 years that we run normally once per week, but we'll still give the client hourly granularity. And back to your point, people want data how they want data. And so we've done everything from starting off with what I think is best in class UI UX for them to just kind of visually see what is going on. Then we also have API that people can look at. We also have partnerships with like Snowflake so that they can go in and ingest data that way. Really love what Snowflake's doing. They've been a great partner for us. And then we'll also, some people want to ingest via Power BI. And so you kind of got to, having over 100 customers, you got to cater to what they need. Because at the end of the day, the data is the data. And some are never, some of the traders are really hilarious. They ask for their login every 6 months. I'm like, need to reset up the API? Oh, yeah, pretty much. And then other people, we can sit and they're like logging in every single day.
Yeah.
I guess my question was around, for someone who doesn't understand this market so well, retailers were your first customer target. Tell us a little bit about why is this forecasting so important for us, and how does it actually work? Yeah,
because I just flipped the light on. How are you able to predict my future actions? I don't even know what I'm doing.
That's why it's nice to aggregate a bunch of people. We've got, I think, around 2.5 million deregulated meters in Texas. And so you can kind of say, okay, this offsets the other person. But the reason it's important is you need to know what's coming the next day. So every morning, said retailer is bidding into a day ahead market. They have to put in their bids by 10 a.m. Most of them probably do it around 7 or 8 just to make sure there's plenty of time. And then they go say, dear ERCOT, this is how many megawatts I would like to buy hour ending 1. So like midnight to 1 a.m., 2, 3, all the way to hour ending 24. And then if they get picked up and they go in and get a price, they now know they get to rest easy. If they got their number correct, the price is already set. If it's not and they need to buy more, then guess what? The real-time price, as we all learned during Winter Storm Uri, can go a little wild. And so that's why people need to know. It's really going back to the not making money, but mitigating risk, because they now know I'm locked in at this price, but they have to get the number right. If they bought 100 megawatts and it comes in at 120 megawatts, they're going to have to go buy that 20 megawatts from the market. They're going to be buying that 20 megawatts from the market. Everybody else is probably at the same time. And because it came in 3 degrees hotter, which we know 3 degrees in summer with, I think, 1,000% humidity, it feels like is definitely gonna add a good bit to the price. And so that's where it is. It's just really about that price surety.
So there's this is, I guess, where the question was going is on the one hand, they got to pre-buy the power in a day ahead. And if they don't buy enough, they have to buy in the spot market. And I assume if they buy too much, they resell it or they just lose it. Right?
It's the same way. If they buy too much, then it might say, you bought too much. Well, maybe everybody else bought too much as well. It's really windy today. We didn't expect it to be so windy. As we know, wind is essentially free after you have your cost of capital. With tax credits, at one time, it was like negative $30-something was in the money just because of all the different tax incentives. And so wind is free. And so if it's really windy, power is going to be really cheap. So that's where you don't want to buy too much either. But you, as they say, long and wrong and short and fired. So,
and so how did people do this before? Because I assume it's more than data. I assume it's more than the best AI model. Were people just guessing like the bids before and the demand?
Yeah, they had a really hard time because, I mean, you think about it, back in the back in the day, you had that kind of meter maid showing up and your dog chased them and they were pulling 1 meter read every like month or two. And then, I mean, you hear about places in New York where obviously everything's very densely populated and like the door will be locked to the basement where the meter reader is and they go read it like once a year. So you've heard those horror stories and then some crazy bill comes out. So the data just wasn't that good. So yeah, it was pretty kind of blind guess because you're dealing with what they call summary data, which is like a data point every month. Not that helpful. We're doing something every second, but definitely every 15 minutes. And so it was definitely a lot of guessing. Our good friends, Microsoft Excel, is how they kind of have put that out. But this is something that the AI use case is extremely helpful because, as I mentioned earlier in this is becoming a harder and harder problem. And so with a harder problem, you need better solutions. And so from our standpoint, we're not just saying, hey, a good old fashioned linear regression model is going to do it. We're looking at the latest and greatest deep learning, all of the above, and then ensembling different models together. And so saying these 6 models and they automatically weight itself. This is where it's nice having people much smarter than I controlling all of this. And so our team of PhD data scientists go in and we'll merge the model together. And so it'll be like 22% of this model and 18% of this model, et cetera. So any output that you're seeing is going to be derivative of 4 to 6 different models. And then we also have, depending on the region, 2 to 4 different weather vendors. So
this is why someone would hire you instead of trying to do it themselves. Right.
Exactly. And this is the nice thing. I mean, you get to raise venture capital, which I'm very passionate about. And I mean, all about from your career is that the best and brightest stuff that's going to come out. You've got to kind of say, hey, this is a good idea. I'm willing to put $1 million into said company that may or may not work out. Historically, it's not going to work out. And so we've raised $30 million, have 100 employees, and have been at this for 6.5, I guess January will be 7 years. So we have that, and then we get to scale that out across over 100 companies. And so if you have a problem, it's a problem we've already seen because, again, we have those 6 customer segments with really good use cases and all and really good clientele in all those different customer segments. So you get to say, hey, like big retailer, we've already seen this, so we can come and do this. So it's really that first build kind of covers it, and then you get to go in and from like economies of scale, essentially.
Do you find the models are kind of customer specific, or is there lessons learned, not just in terms of like how you do it, but in terms of the data you collect, in terms of how it's able to create better predictions for others? So is there a network effect of having more kind of customers on the system? Definitely
a network effect of having more customers on the system combined with how long we've been in the market. And so you look at Europe, which we just launched, the press release came out in June 11th of this year. Texas, we launched the kind of MVP, like minimum viable product, in November of 2018. So we've learned a lot more lessons in Texas than we have in Europe to date. But however, the models are very transferable. That's how one of the jokes we have internally is it took us 1.5 years to stand up PJM. So PJM is basically Chicago all across the mid-Atlantic region. Originally stood for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, but now is like a dozen or so states. And it took us 1.5 years to stand up PJM, and it took us 6 months to stand up 16 European countries. So we've gotten a lot better. We have a lot more people, a lot more funding, and have done it before. But this is where, going back, if we make a change to the model, it's across really all of the models. But then we'll have to hone in on certain specific regions, because California looks much different than New York.
Yeah.
So the way you're describing the models and like, I guess the way your AI algorithms work, it seems very complex. So if someone asked you, why are you forecasting really high prices for tomorrow? Can you answer that question?
Me personally?
No, I'm just wondering, like, if someone asks you, like, why, because it's just the model that are predicting it, and there's so much going into these different models.
Our scientists know why things are going in, because we're not always right. We're not infallible. We're right most of the time, most places. But at the end of the day, can still be wrong. And so we'll go back in and kind of figure out the postmortem, and if something is, say, next week looks really high, then we'll go in and kind of dig in and make sure to understand why it's working that way. But it does a little bit turn into a little bit of a black box. So no, we definitely stay on top of it and understand the inputs and make sure that the different weather inputs are going correctly, making sure the ISO didn't give a negative print or give bad data. So yeah, there's a lot going on. I mean, that's how you get 100 people and half those are engineers, like engineers and scientists.
And then I guess it's also fine tuning the models again, right? Like if it is showing you something that's kind of an anomaly, then you would go in there and like tweak it.
Yeah.
And you said you guys are working on deep learning. So that's part of where you are automating the tweaking almost, right?
Exactly. So our models retrain every single hour because they run every single hour, and they've been retraining since November of 18. And this is one of the things we actually have. It's a little bit of a late mover advantage. Our tech stack started in Google Cloud. We've since moved over to Azure, but at the end of the day, this isn't an Excel model that had a little bit of like VBA on top of it and became this. And so this is something that if a company's 20 years old, which there are multiple 20-year-old companies in this space, there was no cloud, right? And so this is where being a younger company and having that tech stack, but now being old enough and well capitalized enough, definitely gives us a big advantage over someone who's had to do different iterations and say, hey, we're going to move into the cloud. And we're like, we started there day one. So
cloud native.
We are definitely cloud native. And that's where, I mean, AI is the hot button right now. And I will say one of the coolest things that I guess accolades that we've had is one of my investors texted me one morning, and I was making oatmeal for my 3-year-old. And he goes, hey, congrats on the list. I was like, okay, like what list? And he goes, Andreessen Horowitz put out their American Dynamism top 50 AI companies in the US. There were 12 energy companies and 1 Texas company, and we were the Texas energy company. That was kind of the first, and we have no money from them at all. And that was kind of the first, whoa, okay. If we end up on Energize's roadmap, I'm like, I know, guys, you like, you let our Series B.
And that wasn't like your goal, right? To come on the top list of AI companies. That's not how you started.
No, ours was to do what we thought was best in class. And that's what we've done. And it was just really amazing to get noted for that, because I do feel that too many people everyone always chases the shiny object. And right now, everyone is just chasing AI. You see a bunch of people changing their domain to .ai. You're like, come on. You just saw that in blockchain before that. Like it's always something, right? There's always a new shiny object that's like best in class. You're like, build the company that you want to build for the reason that you want to build it. If it takes care of the latest and greatest, by all means. But that was definitely something that kind of fell into our laps, and we're like, oh, they noticed that we've been doing AI the entire time. And this is what it's like to hire kind of best in class engineers and data scientists. We've lost 1 data scientist in the history of the company, and that was to Google DeepMind. And I was like, Godspeed.
That's who you're competing against.
That's who I want to lose to. I was like, best of luck. So his name was also Sean. I was like, I guess it's just too big.
It's the name.
Too many Seans.
Too many Seans.
Yeah.
So you said something I'm curious about. So you switched from Google Cloud to Azure. Was I assume they didn't show up with whatever Azure Cloud credits, and that's why you switched over. Was there more to it?
There was definitely more to it. I mean, Microsoft is definitely owning the narrative around AI. And then the other thing too is just having that opportunity to deal with them from a partnership standpoint. And so because Alex had been at Microsoft for a couple of years and had a great relationship with that team, Microsoft has a very high percentage of US utilities and an even higher percentage of European utilities. And so it really helped from a go-to-market standpoint. That was really the reason. And obviously their incentive is because more stuff's going to run on Azure. And we moved over and it's been a great partnership that's just getting launched. I think last month is when we put out that we are transactable in the Azure marketplace. So it was definitely some commercial implications, but also on top of that, I mean, Microsoft is definitely owning the AI story with OpenAI and that investment. And they are, been a great partner for us.
You said something transactable on the marketplace. What does that mean?
So different utilities have what's called a MAC spend, Microsoft Azure Commitment to Compute. And so you'll go in and say, I'm said big utility. I agree to 3-year X million dollars of spend. And so if you come out of, if you work with Amperon because it's in Azure, then you can say, oh, we have a 3-year, $1 million contract. So that comes out of your max spend. So it's a really great, there's a bunch of cool companies that have the same ability. And so we also get to kind of partner with those companies and work together with utilities, just because, again, any budgeting is one of the hardest things about selling to utilities. And so this comes out of normally like a CIO, CTO budget and is already spoken for. So yeah, it's been a really good go-to-market motion. And obviously Microsoft is bigger and has more people than we ever will. Feel confident in that one.
Well, so, and I'm glad that you went down that route, because I think one of the things that was not clear to me, or maybe this is a more of a local trend, is if you're planning to serve in the energy industry, there is a advantage to starting on Azure as opposed to some other maybe newfangled technology, because the kind of market trust exists for the customer, especially I assume if they hear that you're on Azure and they're going to give you their data, it's like, okay, you're check the box. It's SOC 2 compliant. I don't even know what that means, but all these things that like an IT department would care about. Is that part of what you mean with the go-to-market?
Absolutely. It definitely has that higher level of trust. They're already engaged there. They're already like have sellers there who know. There was a large utility that we had conversations with, and Microsoft goes, would you like to speak with them? Like, we've spoken with them like a handful of times. They're like, would you like to speak to the CIO and the CTO? Yes, please. So it's just a different level of conversation, just because, I mean, it is one of the biggest companies in the world, right? And so it definitely gives you that. And going back to SOC 2, did not know what that was originally when we started the company. We had a large company that owns generation in town, and they're like, you have to be have SOC 2 compliance. So I go to Abe, my co-founder, our CTO, and I was like, hey, we have to do this. He's like, how big is the contract? I go, $24,000. He's like, no. I was like, this is one of the best logos in the space. We have to do it. And so we did it. I think at the time we had 8 people at the company, and now we have 100. And so doing it with very little tech debt was one of the best decisions that we made. And since then, now you get to walk into and basically you just say, here's a copy of our last SOC 2 report. We just did our audit. Everything went great. So we're on year, I don't know, 4 or 5 of SOC 2 now. But doing that with very little tech debt was great. And I think Abe's not mad at me anymore for asking me to do that.
Tell us about your startup journey. I mean, you started 6 years ago. 100 people today, being able to raise 30 million Series B. Not many companies reach this stage. So tell us a little bit about your...
And certainly not in Houston.
Not in Houston. Yeah, not tech companies in Houston.
We're working on that.
Yeah. So tell us about that journey, the ups and downs, and what do you think you were able to do differently to get to where you are?
Yeah. Definitely something that I think about a lot. So I grew up here in Sugar Land, like big Astros fan, Rockets fan, Texans are fun, went to A&M. Like, I'm Texas boy through and through, but I was living in New York, moved there in like 2016, 2017. And in spring of 2017, I went to New York Energy Week and actually volunteered in New York Energy Week, and Abe volunteered at New York Energy Week as well. And so it was really cool to see. I know y'all did a ton of programming with Houston Climate Week. And so it's just really exciting to see that here, because that's how I met my co-founder back in spring of 17. And so my thesis was I wanted to know what New York knew about energy. Not a lot. But I also didn't see a vibrant tech scene in Houston. And up there, especially in 2017, it was co-founders everywhere, data engineers, data scientists. I mean, just this level of talent I've never seen. And so Abe's joke is, I'll build it if you can sell it. And so I was like, all right, this like young, like New York hacker basically like sold a hacker company to Intel coming out of college, was like pre-IPO at Etsy, early at Planet, like stood up a data science team at McKinsey. And I was just like, whoa, got Forbes 30 under 30 in energy. I was just like, this is great. And so just us two, the odd couple, but kind of came in and said, hey, let's build this. And then I thankfully have been networking since freshman year at A&M, which was a couple of years ago. And so I have a basically 25-year-old network, and I was able to go around and say like, hey, what's interesting? What's helpful? How do we do this? I think so many people walk in and say, hey, you have this problem and this is your answer. That almost never works in going in and being like, so I'm smarter than you and have more resources, so you should do things this way. That very, very rarely works, especially with the stubborn cowboys in Texas.
Yes.
And so having the Silicon Valley types roll up and telling someone at insert large like oil and gas major here that they don't know what they're doing doesn't go well. I worked at a company that got bought by Lehman Brothers, and the culture clash between the two is pretty hilarious. And so that's where I think that we could actually kind of figure this out. And so that's what we did. And then the other thing I think, or one of the other things we did that was really wise, is we just stayed very focused on the customer and just, I ran sales for the first 5 years basically of the company. And then really kind of, I guess we've had like proper sellers for like 2.5 years, maybe, 2 years now. And so was able to just do it ourselves. So we raised $2.76 million over the course of the first 4 years. And then in the last 2.5 years, we've taken in 28 on top additional. And so that's where I think just getting that really, really strong product market fit, knowing that your customers just cannot live without you.
Are you ready to lead the decarbonization charge? Energy Tech Nexus is your platform for growth, offering unique resources and expertise for energy and carbon tech founders. Join us at energytechnexus.com and start building your Thunder Lizard.
So how did you know when you had product market fit?
When there's a really cool software called Mixpanel, and it basically lets you go in and see how many times people have logged into your site. And when we were realizing that people were in our app all day, every day, that was kind of one of the first things. When something would be wrong, they would catch it in like seconds or a minute and then ping us. And so you're like, we are one of your core functions. Like, this is really important and a really big deal. And so I think that's when we knew that we had product market fit. But then we also, you can never stop getting product market fit. You've always got to know there's someone on your tail. You've got to make sure you're the most accurate. The grid is changing, the whole thesis behind the company. It's getting harder. There's other people raising money, just all of the above. Different product sets is, as I mentioned earlier, demand's not the story, it's net demand. And so just being able to continue to iterate on that, I think is what's really important, and one of the things that's made us successful. But hopefully we can get more of the good startups in Houston. We've got a few really good ones. But again, just want to see more of that, because I very much believe that energy transition is going to run through Houston, because this is where all the money is.
You know, you spoke about how when the winter storm Uri came, it was a difficult time for the retailers. How did that impact you? And, you know, was there a moment where you were like, I don't know if we're going to make through this?
Oh yeah, totally. So I've told some variations of this, but I think Abe wrote this super nerdy thing on UFE, which is unaccounted for energy. And that was a number that was very, very small historically, like plus or minus like 0.1%. And it went through the roof, and the charges were astronomical, had a $9,000 price cap. Ancillaries went up to $22,000 per megawatt hour. Our clients had a lot of megawatt hours. We had a very we had less than 1 million meters on at that point. This is one of the things that kind of made us well known. So I got a phone call, and guy calls me from one of the biggest retailers, period. And he's like, you don't know who I am, but our CEO and you had breakfast a year ago, and he thinks that you may be able to help us solve this problem. And so we went back and resettled all of these meters. And by we, I mean Abe by himself just didn't sleep and went and resettled these meters. We were charging most of our customers.
Sorry, so resettle means like you're verifying the amount that came out, and the issue was that there was a bunch of energy unaccounted for.
Exactly.
Right. And so you're reconciling.
Exactly.
Okay,
and from our standpoint, so my meter was on one of our retailers, and it showed that I had power, I knew I did not have power. And so they were just guessing and just filling in the blanks. And I was like, we did not have power for like 72 hours. There's no chance I'm getting a bill for these hours. And there's no chance that my customer, who I was on, and we would use my meter for things and just look at the 22-digit number. And we're like, it's not possible. And so we went back and said, hey, there's a whole bunch of zeros in there because, I mean, as you know, so many people lost power here and for very long periods of time. And so we were able to go in and resettle that. ERCOT resettled things out of, out of cycle. They normally have like certain like X days that they will go in and resettle and say, hey, we'll try again. With the last one being 60 days. And so we were able to go in, resettle that data, and then send it to ERCOT. And so we were doing these reports for $5,000. People would have paid $100,000 for it, but we just went out there and kind of got our name out there. I was blowing up LinkedIn, telling anybody who was listening, tagging the CEO of ERCOT in my post, and just going for it. And so, I mean, it's as with the Digital Wildcatter Studio, they're all for a good PR stunt like that when you, when you're especially early stage. And so that was what really kind of did it. And then we got brought up at the ERCOT meeting. One of my good friends, he's like, they're talking about Amperon. I was like, we have 10 employees. I was like, why are they talking about us at the meeting? And so that was kind of one of the first like aha moments of like, we're really onto something. And then it's been a really good journey from there. But we had a bunch of retailers that got kind of, we'll call it like acqui-hired, or just kind of went out of business altogether just because those were such high prices. And you saw what you couldn't go back and ask the end user for that. But the way most of the contracts are structured, you're just locked in at a certain rate. So yeah, I think that was one of definitely the first kind of aha moments. And then we also, when COVID hit, we just gave away our product for free. And so just said, we'll give it away for 2 months, come back. And then we wound up having like a 90% hit rate on that. And I was like, okay, we're onto something, because people are like, I'm not going to buy it. No, I don't have time. And then we're like, just take it. And so they took it and it worked. So there were a few moments like that where we really had to put ourselves out on a limb, but it hit like pretty hard.
Yeah. Do you find that it's as much about getting brain space with people? Because once they get it, they find it valuable, right? So how do you market, I guess is the
question. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
You've got to figure out the correct time for someone to do it. And it's different for everyone. Someone could say, hey, we're going through something I can't even tell you about. So I think just really good. And this is something I wasn't good at as a seller. Thankfully I don't have to sell anymore. And so, but going through and asking those very clear closing questions of saying, when are you available to look at this? When do you think you'll have the bandwidth? When do you think your team is? Because for us, I can turn someone on for a trial in seconds, but if they're not going to look at it, it's pointless. Yeah. And then you just get frustrated. You're like, well, I don't have an answer. Well, I haven't had time. And so just setting those expectations in the sales call is something that like Tom, as our VP of sales, does a phenomenal job. And so, because saying, hey, we're not good right now, but come back in 45 days because I know that X life event is about to happen or X company event is about to happen. So give me a second, is extremely helpful. So it's, I think just that full setting expectation, because you just need them to have the brain space is a great way to put it, to say, hey, let me actually do a proper, review of the product. And that's also why now having a technical sales team, we're able to go in and provide a lot of those reports for you that you don't have to do yourself. So you can go back and look at how we tracked historically, because you're going to put some weight into how we do for the month that you're on trial. You're also going to go look at the backcast and see like, hey, how did this stack up? How did it do on this really inclement day? How did it do on this really volatile day?
Do you find you have to give people like a 90-day trial is kind of the main thing, or?
It's normally a 30-day trial, but we do have some, especially if it's customized data, just because I can't give you a backcast of with your meters. I mean, you can, but it's different than us versus the Texas ISO. I can tell you what our forecast was every day at 10 a.m. going back to November of 2018. Great. If you give me your specific set of meters, then it's going to take a minute. So yeah, just different things for different people. But again, at the end of the day, if we get in there, then it's a very good chance we're gonna stay.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, talk to us about your fundraising journey, especially also being a tech company from Houston. A lot of Houston founders complain that we don't have a very evolved venture capital ecosystem.
Yeah, did you raise capital out of Houston?
Maynard Holt, Veriton.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, Maynard's the best.
He's the best. Yes.
Yeah. So, talk to us about that. You did have to do a lot of hustling in the beginning. You and your co-founder did a lot of the work. You did the sales. He went and checked the meters. And then kind of going past that and then being ready, having enough traction to show to VCs who would then come on and invest in your company. How was that journey being from Houston and then having to, I guess, go outside of Houston to actually get the capital?
Yeah. So our first round, we started the company in New York, and then I moved back to Houston in fall of 2019. Kind of nailed that one.
Good timing.
Good timing.
Better be lucky than good. And then we properly moved everything down here the year after. Texas is such a great state to do business. New York, not as much. And so from the raising capital standpoint, the very first round, that was all Abe. I'll give credit where credit is due. He had a relationship with Notation Capital. From just being in and around the New York venture scene. I just showed up to New York, and Notation Capital is the best. They came in early stage, had never done energy investment, said, here we go. We'll give you all a shot. So they led our first round and then came in pretty heavy in our seed round. So that one wasn't that hard. The A was not that hard. We had multiple term sheets. The B was really, really fast. And so we signed a term sheet 8 weeks after kicking off the fundraise in summer of 23, which was historically a pretty bad time to raise capital. The seed round was where we had the problem. And this is where, going back to the product market fit story, we were really good in Texas, and we had a client in Australia, the Australian energy market operator, and that was it. So there was no East Coast. The East Coast operates very differently than Texas does. And so they hadn't seen what they wanted to see from a repeatable process standpoint. And our revenue was, someone told me, and I never knew it would be so true, the hardest capital to raise is when you're between $1 of annual recurring revenue and $999,000 of annual recurring revenue.
Yep. Because you get measured differently.
You just don't you have. So I advise some early stage startups, some formally, some informally. And the thing I tell them is, don't take revenue until you're ready to go, because then someone has set a price on this and you can say, no, it's a big name, it's this. And they'll say, guess what? We only have one metric. You took this product is worth $100. End of story. That's what it is. And so that's where it's just hard, because you get to tell the story and own the narrative when you have the pre-seed round of, hey, these are two talented people who just met each other, in Abe and myself, and you can just believe in the team and say, hey, this is going to work. But then once you've actually proven out what the product is worth, then that's where you're stuck. And so there's so many things I would do differently in our seed round. And there's so many things I tell early stage companies now to do differently, just because, again, once you put that dollar amount on it, then they can extrapolate that forever. Our first pitch deck, I'm pretty sure, said, I think $10 per meter per month, which is hilarious because we've got 10 million meters under management. We were doing, unfortunately, less than 100 million a month. So just a little.
Yeah.
And so you kind of look on that and you look back on your first deck. We should be a unicorn already based on this 2017 deck.
Yeah.
Because everyone is by this stage, right?
Yes.
We would have IPO'd 3 years ago. It's fine. And so that's where you just kind of get to own the narrative. And that's what I think Houston doesn't have as many early stage funds who could go in and really say hey, let me teach you how to run a company. Let me teach you how to do this. Let me teach you about cap table management. Let me teach you about board management. Just so many things that I'm definitely passionate about, with this being my home, that we need help on. The thing Houston does have is, once you have product market fit, the CVC space is good. So corporate venture capital, this is where you've got a bunch of like Barbara Berger at Chevron kind of invented the game in the energy space here. And then so many others have gone on, and you see that the big, like Shell has one, Aramco has one, Oxy has one, and that's great. But they're not a good early stage investor, because they're going to tell you that, hey, build this for my company, build this for but we have had we've had great success with CVCs. We work with the big utility that we have quite a bit of contracts with. I mentioned D.E. Shaw, Orsted has been an amazing investor. So that's kind of where I think the early stage in Houston, just they need people to be able to take that first step. Yeah. But unfortunately, everyone here is like, what's your EBITDA? And you're like, there's no EBITDA. There's not going to be EBITDA for quite a while. Yeah. It's venture.
But I think that's what we're trying to help with the Nexus, is to provide some of that original, I don't know, infrastructure for the startups and the founders.
Totally.
Because it's so challenging. And we've been working with some founders who come through who have everything from messy cap tables to an unclear IP portfolio, and and you got to get them ready for financing.
Yeah.
And that's something that was in bits and pieces in Houston, but I don't think there's been a lot of consolidated kind of operators. And it's a big gap here, but you got to build that kind of tacit knowledge in the ecosystem. And it doesn't get built overnight. So it totally resonates with me when you say that didn't exist here. I'm going to share an anecdote that I saw, which you might appreciate. So I was looking at some early startup unit economics for a while, and was realizing that there's a whole group of like startups that will mark list price for their total revenue, and then they'll give discounts to their customers and mark that as a sales expense.
Oh, jeez.
So that's how you get through the $1 million revenue number. You're like, this was cost of customer acquisition, so we gave them a 40%, discount, and it allows you to almost double your revenue number.
That's funny. We have definitely never
That's very
done
much
that.
a California kind of thing.
Wow.
I don't think that would ever cross our minds here in Houston to do that. But it when you realize it's all driven by revenue metrics and that measurement, you're like, okay.
I'm just going to start giving everybody a 99% discount and just go wild.
Yeah, that's how you get unicorn status. It's all sales discount right here.
That's really funny.
Right.
I've heard a lot of things. I have not heard that.
Yeah. So, the tricks of the trade, I guess.
But
don't do that here.
Definitely don't do that here. They will tear your financials apart by whatever like former private equity person that they have trying to get into venture.
Were there any failures that you're comfortable sharing along the way that you learned along the way, other than recognizing revenue too early?
Yeah, apparently miss big on this one. My revenue is going to be at least a 50% discount on everything. Failures. There's been plenty. I think there's products that we've rushed to go out the door too quick, that we didn't sit down with like the right end user, the right customer. And so I think we've had some like that. Our seed round was really hard, not telling the full story. I caught up with a woman today, this morning, that was at a CVC, and she's like, we haven't talked in like a couple of years. I'd love to hear how things are going. And we were like, you literally, like, Amperon has gotten bigger than your story that you pitched me, and she did not invest in for the seed round. And I was like, because I was a short-term trader, and so like I didn't look at enough vision. I didn't look at like what the future could look like. And so I think that's the one piece that I definitely failed at early, is just not seeing like what this could actually become. And so now I spend a lot of time doing that. And this is also where you surround yourself with the best people. I mean, you want to talk to people who have that good forward vision. And I mean, that's what I saw in Energy Climate. We got to go to so many cool events with really smart people. There's like a fun dinner that like Charlie Nelson threw, and just like a whole bunch of cool founders, and all of us get to. So I think just really looking at vision is one of the things that I missed. And the way you can get around this stuff of just like not knowing how to fundraise. I sat down with a friend of mine, Kieran, who's an amazing fundraiser at Arcadia. And he's the one who really sat me down and helped me tighten up my story for the Series A. The A and B have been pretty easy. And so I think just being around those mentors, and that's what I see that you're building now, is just having that group of the kind of like, it's a lonely job. Let's all do this together. So I think that's definitely one of the biggest mistakes, misses that we had, is just not surrounding myself as much as I could with like other founders. And part of it was COVID too, right? Not my fault. But I would ping anybody who would chat and just basically say like, hey, like, do you want to talk about this? And so I had some like pretty big name CEOs like say, yeah, happy to talk. I'm bored out of my mind locked in my house in San Francisco. I was like, cool. And so I think that's one of the definite misses we've had at Amperon. So just surrounding yourself with those right people. I've got Tim Healy on my board. He was the co-founder and CEO of Internoc. I mean, he did it for 17 years. I'm speaking with him tomorrow at the Energize Summit about that. And so like having someone who's been through this is just extremely helpful. So just get your advisors on correctly, and then also like become a part of that ecosystem that like you're creating right now. We had an Urban Future Lab up in New York, and it was a woman, Pat Sapensley, was running it, and she's unbelievable. And so it was nice to go in there and sit and look at another company and then see their $100 million fundraiser. Like, wow, I still got work to do.
Yeah. It's amazing how much she does by herself. I know she has a whole team behind her, but she's a dynamo.
She's moved on now.
Yeah. So let's see. When we think about the innovation ecosystem here in Houston, is there any, and you've kind of seen it evolve across the life of Amperon, is there anything you're most proud of that we've developed?
Houston, I think, I mean, having Climate Week was a big W. Should have been done a long time ago. Whatever. It's here. Better late than never.
Yep.
I mean, just having these hubs, I mean, as we're seeing Cannon, Ion, Greentown, like all these different like actual workspaces and office spaces are extremely helpful, just from the collaboration piece, to say like, do you have a good accountant? Like, who is really cheap and can still do the job, and I only need them X amount of hours per month? And who's your lawyer? Just the simple things that you just don't know, because there's lawyers everywhere in Houston, but the ones who actually know how to do venture is not a thing. So I think that Houston's doing a lot better of kind of like aggregating this. I mean, what you're putting together, I think getting all the right founders together. I guess you had your launch just like during Climate Week.
Yep.
Those are the type of things that I'm definitely proud that we're finally having from like a collaborative standpoint. And there needs to be a lot more, because there were so many cool hubs that we had in New York. So UFL was out in Brooklyn, Urban Future Lab. We got in there from winning the $50,000 pitch competition for like best clean tech startup. We won that in April of 2019. That was a big, like, it was a big deal, and one of our first kind of early, like, whoa, we're onto something. And then we worked in a space like next to Grand Central. There was just a whole bunch of startup. It was like backed by like the city. And so just having those ecosystems is something that I'm definitely proud that Houston's kind of putting together now. There's still a lot of room to grow. And we're also finally seeing some good venture capital down here. I mean, when you have big names such as like Tudor, Pickering, Holt, like Dan, Bobby, and Maynard all doing this, I mean, we made room for Maynard on our cap table just because it was so important to have someone who really got it, and also understood that a lot of this energy transition needs to be paid for by oil and gas dollars. And Maynard can text any of those CEOs. He definitely had a big, as I was negotiating this, he had a really, really big CEO in town call my cell phone and say, I should take money from Maynard. And I was like, I've never felt more out of my league than having Maynard have this big name, like Fortune 100 CEO call me. I'm like, I gotta make this work. So it's fun having them. I've been Dan Pickering's conference. My VP of finance is there right now. So just a lot of this stuff is going to be, those are the people who really need to lead it.
Yeah. I was going to say, we're going to ask who the hidden gem was, but I think it's Maynard Holt, and Veriton is one of the hidden gems in Houston. We don't talk about that much.
Yeah.
They're definitely a hidden gem. I mean, you've got some other early stage, or like, they're kind of like mid stage, like kind of seed AB. And so, no, there's definitely a bunch more hidden gems kind of popping up, starting to do that early, the early round stuff. So this is what I may want to come back as whenever this wraps up in quite a while. But going back and doing the venture thing and just helping out those early stage founders. Powerhouse is here now. Nextera has a really good venture arm, all here in Houston. So making some progress.
Good.
We ask most of our guests to share their climate impact stories. So we were wondering if you have one that you could share with us.
From a climate impact standpoint, we've got 4 of the biggest renewable companies on the cap table. And that's where I think it really makes a difference, especially now as we're having like asset level solar, asset level wind. I think this is my personal thesis that things are going to start moving away from PPAs just because you are seeing so much volatility in the market. If you're a battery, you don't want the whole thing told. You probably didn't secure a really high price for April and early May, but there were 2 events in April and 1 in early May that paid for a really big chunk of your year out of the blue. And it was very predictable. The sun was going down and the wind was joining it. And so you're like, and there was 25,000 megawatts on outage. It was pretty obvious. So I think that you're going to continue to see that. So I think us just helping renewables and helping batteries make money, because at the end of the day, you want them to get rich so that they can build more, right? And so that's the whole thesis behind it. I mean, in this game, you can do tax credits for a certain amount, but at the end of the time, it still goes back to capitalistic. Like somebody has to stand on its own 2 feet and then kind of go that way. That's what's so amazing now about what we see in like the EV space is I bought a Tesla because it was really fast and had a ton of storage and was like great car, good price, all of the above. And so now you're seeing that. I'm not just buying it because it's it's an electric vehicle. It was the best car at the time when I was purchasing a car last year. So I think that that's the type of thing from an impact that Amperon's helped just continue on that path of those companies make more money, then they put more steel in the ground. And so that's why it's great to have, again, all those different customer bases that some are obviously more capitalistic like traders, but then you also have IPPs and utilities and others that are just trying to do what's best for the environment. And
no, it's really important because I mean, we're going to have more different types of energy mix going forward, and we're going to need that reliability of, having power all the time.
Yeah, sustainable and reliable and low cost.
Effective. Yeah. You're helping us do that. So thank you.
Thank you. It's a hard problem to solve.
Yeah. Is there anything our audience can do to support you in your goals?
Buy my stuff.
Tell a friend about it.
Tell a friend. I mean, it's so much of this is word of mouth. I mean, that's how you get to know people. That's how you trust other products. And so nothing makes me happier than walking into an office or having one of our sellers walk in and being like, this huge company, and this huge company all said that we should have already done this. And so like that happened with me. And I was like, that's really fun.
That's a good day.
You're going to listen to these like multi-billion-dollar companies. So definitely tell a friend. We're continuing to get the word out there. Everything's grown so rapidly. We had 28 employees at the beginning of last year and now at 100. So, I mean, things are going up, spending more marketing dollars and then just doing more of this. This is the fun stuff, just kind of getting the story out there, not only for Amperon, but also just the Houston ecosystem in general. So, tell a friend, definitely whatever you can do.
All right.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for helping us put Houston on the map when it comes to innovation, tech, and energy. So.
And AI.
And AI. Yes. Let's not forget AI.
All of the above.
All of the above. So, and thank you for coming on to our podcast.
My pleasure. This was a blast.